Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the U.S. Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. New insights to achieve. Greetings and welcome to our Virtual Enlightenment Salon of November 27th, 2022. Today we have a fascinating discussion in store for you about some possibilities for overcoming the human biological clock. And we have a distinguished panel with us today. We have our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia. We have our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker. We have our Director of Longevity Outreach, Ben Ballweg. We have our Legislative Director, Jason Geringer. And we have our distinguished biotechnology advisor, Dr. Bill Andrews, who is the founder and CEO of Sierra Sciences. We have our previous 2020 vice presidential candidate and founder and CEO of BioViva, Liz Parrish. And we have our biotechnology, our technology advisor and our foreign ambassador in Spain, Dr. Jose Cordero. Our special guest today is Zack Varkaris. Zack Varkaris is a biologist, author, diver, and sporting pugilist. Of Greek descent, Zack grew up in London. After studying marine biology at university, he spent a number of years in the field of renewable energy and conservation before turning his hand at writing novels. And you can check out his website at varkaris.com. Zack is also the founder and scientific director of Austin Biotech, which works in the aging, anti-aging, and fertility domains and applies emerging medical technologies in the effort to overcome the problem of female infertility. So, Zack, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on our Virtual Enlightenment Salon, and please go ahead and begin with your presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Gennady. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me on board today, and really appreciate the time to be able to talk about what I believe and love doing. So I'll get straight into it. I'm just going to do a very basic overview of one of our products and some of our methodology and thinking behind it, and then leave the questions open to the floor. I'm going to be very upfront about some of the things I'm doing, or we as a group are doing. I wanted to have another couple of members of my team on board, but unfortunately they're based in different parts of the world and the time zones didn't work for them for today, unfortunately. So firstly, let's get into it. So Austin Biotech was founded about a year and a half ago as an entity, but can trace its origins back about 20 years. And we are fundamentally about two areas of what we believe is life extension. I don't really like the word life extension. It's more of a quality of life, or what we call not your lifespan, but your Freudenspanne, your joy span. And we are about fertility and aesthetics. So fertility, because if you're not fertile, you are by definition not biologically useful / youthful. And there are very few species in this world that exhibit something as obvious as menopause in women. And by the way, guys, we also get it too. We just don't think we do. It's just a different way. And so this is something that is very much overlooked. It's not particularly sexy as compared to fixing someone with a broken spine. It's far more sort of Tony Starkish, that. And then also the other area is aesthetics, because how you look is how you're perceived, and how you're perceived is how you're treated. And how you're treated has an effect on you biophysiologically. It really does. And we don't have all the answers, as you'll see when we talk about what we're going to talk about, but more that we have opened doors and we've walked through them, and we want to have other people walk through them with us and we can share this knowledge and make it go forward in a meaningful way. We do not know everything. Absolutely. We know a very small amount. We certainly know what we don't know, and that's a very large amount. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through some basics. So as I said, Austin Biotech, this is our project that we've been working on, which is rejuvenating ovaries to enable menopausal women to have children. And we have done this because of two reasons. One, because it is a very serious need that we have in this world. And that need is very important. We hear about the population crisis, the population boom. And, back in the old days when you when you had a kid that's 7 years old, suddenly you could put them out in the fields, as it were. Now they're a sinkhole till they're 25, you take them through college, et cetera, et cetera. Being a parent, I sort of know these things. But the interesting thing, though, is that, yes, great that women have choices in this world, which is fantastic. So they have the ability to choose when they want to be mothers and so on and so forth, which I firmly believe in. Absolutely. But the one area that really is not talked about is not the cost and the choice, but the actual dropping actual fertility rates in both women and men. And this is something that's happening around the world, but particularly very clearly in the G8 or the industrialized countries. And the now industrializing countries are having the same thing. And this is where I say we open a can of worms and we start to sort of pull strings and we don't know where that goes. But there are very clear signs showing reduced sperm levels in men, of motility and also sort of morphology, and also the reduced number of fertility and early menopause in women amongst a series of both racial and cultural groups. So I'll get into that. So we created a project based on our original studies that we worked with, which was using something called PRP. Oh, look at that. It didn't go. The background was PRP. And the PRP showed that that is platelet-rich plasma. It's taken from your blood, it's sort of centrifuged out, and it's put back into the ovaries as an injection. We tried that with a very limited clinical trial with some of our colleagues, and the results were mixed at best. Yes, we saw some great results in terms of slightly increases in egg quality, but they were very, very temporary. We saw clear limitations. You were not going to have a good chance of reversing menopause. And also, it limited what you could do. You had to really be under 40 years old. You had to be almost in virtual perfect health conditions with one minor flaw, which virtually none of us, in fact, I would wager that none of us on this panel are in virtual perfect health conditions with one minor flaw, right? So we realized there were limitations, and the biggest limitation was it just didn't have the staying power. So we had to go for a new protocol. And so the new protocol we went for was using bone marrow derived stem cells, autologous as opposed to allogenic. And why did we choose autologous? And for those who don't know, autologous means from yourself, from the Greek aftologos, from yourself, as opposed to allogenos, which is from someone else, which is allogenic. Well, there's two reasons. One is the moral reason, which you shouldn't be using other people's stem cells to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, which is all well and good. And then there's also what we call the pragmatic reason. There are issues with these cells taking, there are a lot more variables involved. And as far as we're concerned, aging is not, it is a condition, but it's not a genetic flaw. Again, I'm probably opening a can of worms, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of questions on that one. So I'm ready to take that on going forward. But aging, we view it as part of the, should we say, the curve of life, for want of a better term. So we built on the work from other people, firstly from the University of Chicago, from Professor Al Hendy, who I've worked relatively closely with. He had a pilot study done with 3 women who had premature ovarian failure, POF, and also PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And these are quite common, especially certain amongst certain groups, certain African-American groups, certain Northern European groups as well, which the Midwest has a very large genetic makeup of people from Northern Europe. And they had mixed results with it, but they've decided to go forward with more allergenic areas. And because we are looking at not people who have premature anything, it's more that we realize that society has meant that, you know, when you were 15 years old back in the day, you were ready to be a mum. You were by the time you were 30, you were likely to be a grandmother. Well, that doesn't work like that anymore, right? Nowadays, 15, you're a child. So we have a choice. Do we become Stone Age again? Or do we go forward into something that we acknowledge that society has moved on, and therefore that science has to, or biology has to move on with it? And of course, as we know, biology is far slower to catch up than silicon chips are. So because of that, we've looked at ways of extending the life cycle, because look at it very clearly. And I actually had a video that I might show afterwards to show you this. But you graduate high school at 18, you go to undergrad, you're 21, you do a master's 22, say you want to do a PhD, or you want to do a doctorate, or you want to do law, you're 28 years old when you leave. And then by the time you're 30, your fertility is falling off a cliff, along most people, not all people. So you have a choice. You've got to find someone who fits all the boxes, and you find a partner, or you do it alone. And all of you who are parents here know what it's like to have a child. It takes a village to raise a child. So we're looking at saying, why is it not possible that a woman can go in and have a first kid at 50? Hey, why not? Look, I'm in my 50s and I've got 2 children. I've got one that's 23 and I've got one that's 6 years old. I have the energy to work with those children, but I have much more maturity now than I did before. And so building on this was very important. And this was very much our driver of how we drove it forward. And the University of Athens, and also Heraklion in Crete, which is, well, I'm from Crete myself, excluding the British accent. If you want, we can speak with the Greek accent, but we will do that later. So what I'm saying is that where we have, we worked with the PRP and Dr. Pantelis, and also another Dr. Varkaris, actually. He worked on expanding it with PRP, and we're using their methodology of delivery with the stem cells, autologous stem cells, taking how we concentrate them and applying them together. So it's 2 technologies put together, and we call this technology exotherapy. Pretty standard, exosomes and some therapy. It's not rocket science. So it's the exosomes we use, which are taken from platelet pooled plasma, and they are the sort of biological chewing gum to stick the stem cells onto the egg or the ovary, so that we can find a way of rejuvenating the ovary. Now, there's some things that have come out of this, which again, I'm sure some of you, Bill maybe, and a couple of other people on this panel might start to really pull me down on this. And I'll be interested to have a chat on that. But what we realized was a lot of scientists, and we tend to be very narrow focused in what we do. We look at this one area and we're siloed, and probably half of you on this panel have IQs over 175, right? But the fact is that we tend to ignore the things that are around us that are really obvious. Something like baselining the candidates. What does that mean? Well, let's take some blood work. But wait a minute. Let's think about this. We take the blood work and we find out they have this amount of estrogen, that amount of progesterone, this amount of cortisol, blah, blah, blah. And then we discover that actually we didn't know what their baseline was. They might have had a bad day. They might be having stress because something else is happening in their life. And so therefore it's throwing their cortisol levels off. So we're not giving them the best possibility to be what we call fertility fit. So we take their diet, their exercise, and their blood work, and we do a 90-day preliminary trial of getting them physically fit. Now, roughly cycles in human bodies work at around about 90 days. I think it's 88 days. I think they come up with the figure. It varies on different people. So what we do is we do some diet. So some people are super fit. There's a classic example which we now know with experience and some of our data, that if someone comes to us and it's a lady, should we say she's in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, mid 40s to mid 50s, she's super fit, runs marathons, is vegan, XYZ, and then all of a sudden we discover she has really high cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. Like, well, how did this come from? And you discover that this comes because they eat a lot of impossible meats, which have a lot of coconut oil in them, very high LDL. I mean, it's really obvious. Now you know the answer. Oh my God, I can spot it a mile away. In fact, actually, a couple of our sort of candidate coordinators can actually almost predict people's blood groups by a series of questionnaires that we give the candidates. Almost, not quite, but it's that close. So obviously, this came about by accident because just as we were starting to get going, COVID hit. And we had all these candidates ready to go. So again, we can't take credit for it. We just were stuck in a situation where we're like, what the hell are we going to do? We got all these people want to do it. We don't know what to do. So we decided to do this as a holding pattern and came out of these results. And one of the things that came out about this was obviously what we call the law of unintended consequences. And we found that the other area that we looked at was obviously the mental state and the importance of purpose. And again, I cannot take any real full credit on it because I'm from that part of Greece where the blue zones are. My grandmother's from Ikaria. My grandfather is from the other part of Crete that, had they not maybe lost so many people in the Second World War, would still be alive today, and are from the long living areas. So I took my grandmother's recipes and I took some of the methodologies of the village and used that. And discovered that, amongst the blue zone diets, and I have actually met one of the guys who was the author of it and sort of had my opinions on it, on that. But there seems to be very clear overviews, which is the importance of purpose, the mental state. And it's not about the fact that you don't smoke cigarettes or don't drink alcohol, because in Costa Rica, they smoke tobacco like it's going out of fashion. And I've seen how much some of these 90, 100-year-old Greeks can put away some of that sigoudia or raki, as you might call it. So I've seen that. So it's actually about the fact that they believe in something greater, the importance of purpose and the mental state. And that is something that, as objective scientists, is very hard to quantify. Well, we found it very hard. And it opened for us a big area of something that we did not quite understand. And as a man, hey, I had no idea what the concept of menopause was to a woman, or the feeling of feeling looked over, the feeling of feeling that your time was done, the feeling of things that as a man, you just don't think about it. You just have no concept of what that means. And once you open your mind to that, you realize how important that is. Because let's be realistic. We're all going to live to 110 years old, and we're all looking at minimum. Some people here are talking about the death of death, to quote Jose. So we're talking about living, say, to 110, 120 years old. Well, if the average woman goes through menopause, 45 to 55 years old, you're talking about 50 to 60 years of frustrated women. And women have as much power. How many world leaders are women? How many world leaders are running? Look at during the pandemic. The best leaders were all women who are running those countries. New Zealand, Germany, whoever it was. Whether you agree with that or not, it's irrelevant. But the fact is, it's there, and they make a difference. I mean, you could argue that Margaret Thatcher had more balls than any other British prime minister. Let's be honest. I mean, look at that. She's brilliant. So in that sense, you look at that and you go, right, so let's look at it. We want equality. Let's look at equality. Let's look at that in a mental way. This is something that was very much outside our comfort zone, right? And what we were really looking at, and I'll come back to that in a second, was the elephant in the room, which was egg quality. So the results that we had to date with our very small sample group, it's not more than a couple of hundred people over a period of, a couple of years. It's not a lot of 4 years. It's not a great sample size, okay? So we've got to be very careful here. But we had an 85% resumption of menstrual cycle. And we had well, it depends how you do the statistics. We had between a 13 to 19.8% pregnancy rate with an average age of 51 years old, which is phenomenal, obviously. But what that does tell us is that we have a good chance of reversing menopause, which is great for the longevity people. It's not so good for the ones who want to have children, and that's what we're about. So the elephant in the room is egg quality. And this is where we looked at trying to get, I'll go back on that. We're trying to get back on how we help women get pregnant. Now, the other area is actually shared decision-making, because most of these women that come to us are highly educated, high achievers. They run companies, or they're head of departments of major corporations. They're used to controlling the world around them. And then they come to us and they're at a loss. They don't know what to do. And our job is to say, it's not there, dear, have a cup of tea. It's actually, okay, what can we do to get you to focus those skills with you, to focus that on making you achieve the goal that you want to achieve? And there's also another person in the room, and it's usually their partner. They're very rarely in a position where they're single women doing this, and they can be, but they have a partner, whether it's a husband, a boyfriend, or girlfriend, or whatever it is, they have a partner. And that partner has a very large impact on their decision-making quality, decision-making choices, rather. So we embrace them into that. And we have found that some of the results have been very surprising. For instance, we had one lady who was 61 years old, 4 years menopausal, who didn't even do the procedure, just did the baselining, the exercise, the diet, and the mental sort of training. Admittedly, she is a psychologist, so it did help, and we did use some of her skills. But she started to menstruate again after 9 months of doing this, just the procedure. Now, whether she can obviously get the egg quality, that's, again, this is what we're trying to look at now. And I'm sure there's some people on the panel that could possibly help us with that. The next phase is using the same type of technology on the skin, because that is another follicular organ. It is we can debate whether it's an organ or not. I mean, in the technical terms, I don't believe it is an organ in the way of the old school methodology, but it's the first barrier that prevents how you age, disease, etc. And the skin is very important. And so what we do is we're obviously trying to make you look better. So obviously the other thing that we have is that when you have a child, you put on a lot of weight, or your body goes through a lot. And I challenge many men in this panel to really understand what that means, because it's very, very, very big deal. And when you're 21 years old, your body can recover much better than it can when you're 50. Doesn't matter how fit, strong, or good looking you are, you don't recover as quickly at 50 than you do at 20, unless you're, Wolverine or something. So that doesn't work that way. So again, we're looking at the aesthetics. And so we have a series of creams and serums and procedures to obviously get you back to shape, because fertility fitness is not about just wham, bam, let's pop out a kid and it's done. It's about taking that child from birth or from conception to full adulthood. And full adulthood used to be 15 when you were in Latin America. You have your quincera, right? When you're 15 years old, you're a man. When you have the Jewish one where you have your bar mitzvah. You have a bar mitzvah when you're 13, you're a man. No one's a man at 13 anymore. And even if they were then, you're really regarded as a man at really 21, realistically, maybe 24. So you've got a 24-year period or a 20-year period where you have to be that person to guide and take that child to maturity. And that's what we look at, the life cycle costs. And that's sort of probably back on the experience of having the green energy. So we're looking at that, and we look at not your lifespan and not your health span, but as we said, your Freudenspanne, your joy span. It's a phrase we just like the German words. They sound so great, right? So we're putting that together, and it's about, we believe we found certain ways. We obviously wanted to expand it, but it's a way of thinking. And so really then the last phase is really our future. And really, the first area is in the short term is to maximize our protocol, to make it the best it can be, to really improve it. So we have a 25% fertility rate without using IVF, without damaging your body, taking excessive drugs and using our own procedure, making the fact that we can we get rid of keloids? Can we get rid of stretch marks? Can we improve the quality of your skin? Can we make you feel better about yourself? And does that have an effect on your body? In sort of does cortisol? After all, when you're stressed, you produce cortisol, and cortisol is hormone that makes you temporarily infertile. But strange, why would it do that? Oh, well, maybe because when we were cavemen and running around, we had to worry about predators coming. So you don't really want to be sort of getting yourself pregnant when you're running away from a predator. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but whatever it is, this is what we have, and this is what we have to work with. And we obviously want to improve that success rate as much as possible. Unfortunately, I don't have the second phase of results yet. They won't be ready for another month and a half. I was hoping we'd have them ready, but they're not. They won't be ready till January. But a month and a week. But that's how it is. But that's what we have, and so that's really it. I'm not going to sort of go on to too much conversation. I think to a 20-minute quick chat and questions over to you guys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Zack, for that quite fascinating presentation. And I will ask the first question, and then we'll turn this conversation over to our panel. I am intrigued by what you mentioned with regard to the 90-day cycles in the human body with regard to the impacts of diet and exercise on one's blood work, for instance. And I'm curious, how does that work? Why is it that it sometimes takes a fairly lengthy amount of time, like 90 days, from the time you implement a certain change to the time that you see marked effects on the body?
Okay, great question. Why do we choose 90 days? Again, we've sort of gone with a lot of the grandmother's tales, as it were. There's a reason why chicken soup is good for you, kind of thing, and so on and so forth. But what we've realized is that they say it takes 21 to 120 days to break a habit. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know why that is the case, but that's what they say. So we decided 90 days because we thought it would work very well sort of psychologically within a business frame. A lot of people who work in corporations have quarterly targets. It's a number they can understand. We found that over the results that we did over the period where we had the lockdown over a year, or just under a year, but obviously remember, we don't just have clients or candidates in the US, they're all over the world, so they had different effects. We found that that statistically most people saw a significant effect after around about the 70 to 80 day mark. So when you factor in 10% to 15% contingency, rounded up 90 days was a simple number. And that's basically, there's no sort of specific biological reason, but we found that was the case. For instance, give an example. You start off, people say, right, I want to do this. So they do their blood work, but they have lives to live. They might have something wrong. They might have to deal with something. So there's a couple of days out. So you have to factor those in. And we found that obviously getting people to a fertility fitness regime, and it requires exercise and diet, especially exercise, it takes around about 15 days to get into the speed, and then about 45 to 60 days of significant, meaningful data. So they start to see that they lose weight. Oh, you've got to lose some weight. What are you talking about? Why do they don't really maybe need to lose weight. But what it is if we say, if you do this, this will happen, and they physically can see that they have got themselves physically fit, they then have a trust issue with us. Because how are you going to say, well, actually, you're going to have increase in estrogen. Your estradiol is going to go up. How are they going to feel that? I mean, some women can actually feel that, but not many. So what I'm saying is those are things that are abilities to build that mental stability and state, and 90 days seems to be about the right amount of time. Does that cover that for you?
Yes. I think this was quite a good answer. And now I would like to ask Liz. Liz, do you have any questions for Zack?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I have a few. So one question I have is, how many women over 50 were able to carry a baby to term?
All of them.
And how many were that?
7.
7. Okay. And how big was the group of the treated women? So how many people? So there were 7 women over 50 and all 7 carried to term?
Yes. Because the thing is, some of the eggs have been fertilized outside of the womb, and so therefore they're not actually carrying them to term yet, if you see what I mean. So we don't have all the results through. So the 7 are the ones that have gone through at the moment. The sample size was 201. And there was
7 children have been born.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very interesting. Liz, do you have any follow-ups to that?
I have a few more questions, but I'm still getting to them. I'm trying to flesh them out in my mind. So go ahead and
please do. And Liz, that's great, because there are some questions with that. With 1 second, Bill. With that, wait till you answer the other questions, and then I'll be able to answer them. I'll let you answer. It's best for you to ask me the question and me give you the answer before you ask the question.
All right. And we have a lot of fascinating questions in our YouTube chat, which we will get to as well. But I would like to offer Bill Andrews the opportunity to ask a question.
Can I ask one question, please, Bill? Sorry, Gennady, I'm trying to send my link to someone, to maybe for one of my other team members to join on, and I'm messing something up with the link. Can you send me the link again so I can send them in? Is that all right?
Yes, I can do that. And in the meantime, please carry on the conversation. I'll send you the link.
Yeah, and also they don't have to join; they can just listen in. That's all. They don't have to. It's just the YouTube one. It's fine.
Right. Bill, go ahead.
Idiopathic infertility a lot. And I've spoken at a few conferences on the subject and stuff and listened to other speakers. One question that I have is, why it sounded like you were opposed to doing IPS to generate oocytes. Is there a reason for that?
So you cut out. You're opposed to, and he cut out. I didn't hear that. Sorry.
It sounded like you said you don't want to use IPS to generate oocytes.
Explain what you mean. Sorry, I didn't say that.
So I thought I heard there was one thing where you said you're trying to figure out ways of allowing women to have birth without resorting to IPS. Maybe I misunderstood you there. That was the only time I heard you mention
IVF. In vitro fertilization.
Maybe you said IVF. Yes.
IVF.
Yes.
Sorry, no. So okay. Sorry. Yeah. So I was thinking, why people? Sorry. Yeah. So IVF. So basically, okay. When you do IVF, right? You go natural IVF and you have non-natural IVF. So basically, they pump you full of drugs. It's like pumping you full, and it maxes out your ovaries. So if it goes wrong, or if you only have a certain bite to the cherry, you have 11% success rate with IVF. There's a video I could show you, like a quick. It's actually on the website. If you go to the resources
actually,
page.
I was actually asking about IP. P as in Paul. S. So induced pluripotent stem cells.
Right. Okay. Yes, that's what I thought. That's what you meant.
Maybe you said IVS, and I thought you said IPS.
Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah. So that's a very good point, though, about IPS. But sorry, carry on.
I just I remember. Back in 2010, there was a lot of research going on in that. And I know that I read a paper last year where it's still been elusive. People haven't figured out how to do that yet. But it's only elusive because people haven't figured out the correct induction mechanisms to get the cells to differentiate into oocytes. But that would allow every woman to have babies even in their 80s, 90s.
That's exactly right.
What is? But I thought you said that you didn't want them to have to do IPS, and so
no, far from it at all. No, IVF. So we want them to be able to be pregnant from. So when we inject we also work it outside of the body as well. There's different protocols that we have. As I said, we have not perfected everything. Okay, I mean, we really haven't. And so the idea though is we do not want IVF to exist. Yeah, we take away in vitro fertilization, IVF in India, Victor Foxtrot, IVF. So we want to get rid of that and just have it so that the body, exactly as you rightly point out, can heal itself, can control itself, can switch on the right mechanisms. And we can talk about Horvath and Katcher and pre-programmed aging and, yada, yada, and all that stuff. We can talk about all those things. But, as we all know with biology, there are so many variables that we don't get it right. And I challenge anyone to say that they get it right every time, So you're right. The reason why with pluripotent stem cells is that where would you use the IPS if you were to do it? You're a telomere researcher. How would you envisage it working for you? Just out of curiosity.
Well, no, first of all, just you isolating some skin cells,
right?
Treating them with the Yamanaka factors, and you don't have to use gene therapy or insert genes into them to do that. You can just bathe the cells in the Yamanaka factors, and then when they become pluripotent stem cells, lots of research is going on and trying to induce those cells to become differentiated into every other kind of cell. And oocytes is one of the ones that people have had been trouble with. But I think it's just there's just a few tricks that they have to work. But
sorry.
Yes. I was going to say okay. So why it is if a woman is 60 years old and wants to have a child, you just take some of her skin cells, treat them with the Yamanaka factors, induce them to become oocytes, fertilize them in vitro, and plant them back into the woman. And, by every theory known, she should be able to have that baby.
Absolutely right.
So,
but why does it happen then? But why do you think it doesn't happen? That's why I'm asking, just because I'm going to give you my answer.
The research is still underway, and I would have never asked this question if I hadn't thought you said that you were trying to allow people to do it without using IPS.
Okay, great. So if you go on the website, it does actually show how we call it our working title is Spawn. We call it Spawn, which is skin cells to eggs, and it's actually there's one of the areas that they was done in Edinburgh in 2018. They sort of done it in the lab, and having obviously being my alma mater kind of thing. So in that area, but you're right. There's so many areas that things can go wrong. And there's so many areas that we don't know which switch to switch. Are we going to start playing with people's emotional well-being by flying? Oh, you know what? You got one chance. You've got one chance. Let's just see if we can play around with this and do that. You can't really do that. We're not in that position yet that we are in a solid enough base from where we stand that we can be so cavalier. And I mean that in the most respectful way, but the most cavalier with people's lives and emotions. That's the main reason. In terms of what you're saying, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. And we don't have an answer. We really don't have an answer yet. And I'm not going to mention it on this channel, I'm afraid, yet. But I will say that we are, we've been closer than we were for a while on that. It's not like we're not out of that, but so it's funny, I wasn't even talking about that, but yes, that's our next sort of stage. But the first stage is to get what we've done working so well at the moment. And one of those areas is the getting people fertility fit, because you're right. If a woman is one of the areas we have with women and couples and people who are against this is they say, well, wait a minute. If you're like, 55 years old and you have a kid, by the time 20 or 75, how am I going to run around with my kid? Well, My grandfather was my father. My father, unfortunately, was not part of anyway, he was not around in my life from an early age. So my grandfather was in his 70s, and my God, I couldn't do anything with this guy. And he was super fit and healthy. So a lot of that is the fact is that our lifestyles are such that we've created this monster in the room, and that's what we're trying to undo. That being said, absolutely, that is our next level, IPS. Absolutely, and we're looking at that right now.
Let me ask one more question, and I would like to get your email address so that I can ask other questions. I don't want to take up time for you. The other question I have is on following up from Liz's question. You said that some of the women over 50 that were in the study, the oocytes were fertilized in vitro. Were those oocytes obtained from frozen stocks from those women that were obtained when they were young, or were these oocytes obtained from them when they were already over 50?
Great question. And there were three parts of that answer. One, yes, frozen. Two, they used someone else's eggs, but they did it and then realized that their egg quality improved during the process and now come back for a second round because they want to do it with their own eggs. That person's in their 60s. And she brought it full to term, had the baby, etc., etc. But then the third one is we have had one egg, but that quality has not been particularly good. That is the elephant in the room. Yes, you're quite right.
All right, good. That's all I have. But I definitely, if you could text your email, I would love to get that.
Absolutely, Bill. I'll do that.
My next question is, how healthy are the babies, and were there any complications during the pregnancies of women over 45?
Yeah, well, only one of them had 4 limbs. The rest had 8. And apart from that, no, they were fine. Everyone was fine. There's been nothing wrong with the children in the conventional sense. There's no autism, etc. But we did remember do a number of screenings beforehand. And also 1 or 2 times when the screenings didn't look good, they decided they didn't want to do it. Or well, actually, they didn't take in the end. So in actual fact, the decision was made for them, but it didn't happen. So the answer to that is no. There's been none of them are unhealthy in that sense of the term.
And what is the average age of the father?
I don't actually know that answer, actually. That's a good question. Hold on a minute. I can do this from memory. Hold on. I can't do the exact number, but I can say this, that a lot of the fathers are younger, about 10 years younger than the mothers. That's interesting. You've mentioned that, but that's very true. We do check for them for fertility, and it is the one time, actually, that men are more complicated than women, the one time. Which is basically, it's very hard to understand the testes because the genetic information in a sperm is that, and obviously an ovary is a lot more. So there's more space to work with, like working with a cell phone and a tower computer. There's a lot more space to work with in a tower. So in actual fact, improving male fertility is much, much, much harder. But then again, you can take 1 or 2 sperm if you want to and sort of and then almost put it in the pond together. So yeah, they are younger. I don't know. I'll get you the answer to that though. Average age of the men of the women who've gone through the procedure, or the ones who've had children?
The ones who've had children. Well, I think that the entire set would actually be important.
Yeah.
Yes, this is quite fascinating. It relates to a question from one of our viewers, Dowd Sheikh, who writes, older mothers tend to have higher risks of birth defects. How can the risks of medical conditions in newborns be mitigated with this population? And Zach, you mentioned a few approaches that I could glean. One is the dietary and exercise intervention, the blood work testing beforehand, and then also allowing the mother to decide whether to go ahead with the pregnancy after the screening of the egg. Is there anything else that you do to mitigate the possibility that there might be a birth defect?
Repeat that again, sorry.
Yes. So is there anything in addition to what you've mentioned that you would do in your clinic to mitigate the probability of a birth defect with an older mother?
Okay, so again, biology is such that there is a huge amount of nature that we have to deal with going forward. And so therefore, we can only control certain things. What we do is we do the basic panel for any cancer markers. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, number one, because the cancer markers, if you're going to reignite or restart systems, you're going to restart everything. Now, obviously, there are people here who know a lot more about oncology than I do, but the basic rule is that every day we have little cancers forming in our body, and we heal them and we get rid of them, and so on and so forth. So it's a breakdown of the internal systems running, so it's in that sense we check for cancer areas. But then what we do is we also do the diet and exercise, and we do questionnaires. It is not an exact science, that area. It's qualitative as opposed to quantitative. But we have discovered that science will allow us to sort of almost potentially see certain situations that we sort of give them advice. We're not the judge and the jury of whether they can or cannot have children. All we can do is say, are you fit enough to have that child? That's all we can say. We've discovered that one or two candidates who came to the procedure have decided to not go ahead with it, not because of health reasons, but because they realized that they were wanting to have a child for a different reason. And they realized that that's not what they were wanting to have a child for. They just wanted it for longevity areas and sort of health and vitality. So we do basically just do the diet, the exercise, the basic tests. We want to improve that quality if we can. I'd love to be able to improve that quality, and we haven't quite got there yet with that.
Yes, thank you for that answer. And a related question is from Ampero, who wonders, can human postmenopausal ovaries be stimulated to produce new eggs?
Who said that? Ampero. Okay. Bloody well hope so. Yeah. Yes.
All right. Now let's go to Dr. Jose Cordero for his question.
Can I follow up on that last question?
Yes, Bill, go ahead. And then we'll go to Jose.
Well, I've often heard, let's see, I'm trying to get the sun off my face, but I've often heard that you really can't induce new egg cells because most of the egg cells are produced, or at least cells are produced that are destined to become egg cells when the woman is first born. So you just mentioned that you hope that you can create new egg cells. Is that something that there is actually a way of doing that? That somebody's actually shown that can be done?
Yes. I'm not talking about it on this channel right now. Yes.
Okay. All right.
I told you at the beginning, guys, it's something but I don't have the answers. I don't have the full answers, and I don't want to talk about half answers, and then this and that. I'm very happy to talk about that with you offline, Bill. But the answer to that is what we're talking about. That's basically what we're talking about. And you're quite right. It's about the pre-programmed, the flipping on off of the switch. Is it fixing broken parts? Are we pre-programmed? I mean, then you could argue, do we have choice? Do we have choice, and do we go Catholic and have guilt, or do we go Orthodox and just be Zen, or do we go full right wing? Let's go Protestant Calvinism, predestined. We do whatever we want, kill whoever we want. You could argue that viewpoint of philosophy is exactly the same as biology. And why does that philosophy overlap your biology? Why does your lymphatic system overlap your blood system? Why does your skeletal structure, your nervous system? It's almost like a bunch of layers. I mean, who knows? But that's one of the ways we look at it in that way. So we don't know the answer. But yes, that's what we're looking to do. Exactly right. That's exactly what we're looking to do.
So that's interesting. It looks like we have stumbled upon the cutting edge of the scientific exploration in this area.
I wouldn't go so far as to that. That's a very arrogant statement for me to say that. I really believe that. That's not false humility. There's a lot of people out there who know a lot more than we do. A lot more than we do.
All right. Well, then
Humble.
let's go on to
Humble.
Jose Cordero and his question.
Yes. Hello, Zack. It is great to see you again and to learn about what you are doing.
Hi, Jose.
I have a question which is related to philosophy in a way, and you just were talking about philosophy. If we live longer and longer, and
Yes.
as you know, in my book, The Death of Death, which is what I promote, that we basically become immortal, we might not have the same need to have children, because now children are our descendants, are what we want them to be in our place. But if we can do that ourselves, if we will be our own descendants, don't you think there will be a need to have less children, as it is already happening today? If you think about 2,000 years ago, people had many children. Today, normally people, when they get married, they have 1 or 2 children at most. So what is your take about it, becoming immortal and having less children?
Okay, so I'm going to sort of take being a Greek from that part of the world. I'm going to have a laconic view on this one, which is, it's a lot of fun practicing having children, isn't it? So let's be honest with that. So if you don't have the ability to use it, you lose it. So in other words, if you don't actually produce some children, what's the point biologically of having the organs and those pieces available for you? So that takes away a big element of being human, right? So philosophically, call me old-fashioned. I'm old-fashioned, and so I like that sort of mentality of having that area of being able to produce children. I'm not finished having children. I probably will have another child in 20 years' time, maybe next year, maybe 5 years. I don't know, but I'm going to have more. I've just got going, right? And I would like that ability for everyone, or we as an organization would like that ability for everyone to have. And you're very rightly pointing out there, Jose, if we're going to live forever, and that's a very big statement. That's a very bold statement. You have some very bold statements, and I admire you, because that's some serious sarkidias, we'd say in Greek, that on that, to do that. But the issue is that, it's hard enough working out what to do with 50 years of adulthood. Most people are already watching shopping channels by the time they're 35, right? So let's think about this logically. What is it that we got to do? So I think maybe breaking it down into small areas of adulthood. I don't believe that if we stop having children, and as you say, we are just have ourselves to live on, well, we're going to grow stagnant. Stagnation is death. So, okay. So I know this is the transhumanist crew here. So we have a lot more than the biology side, right? So it's almost like going to a sort of theology class, and then we have lots of different religions, isn't it? So it's in that sense, I believe that we've got to work with what we have. I'm not saying that what we're doing is right. I'm saying that this is what I know, or we know. This is what we know, and this is what we believe is the way forward. We're very willing to change, as we showed that we had to change with our fertility fitness regime. I do believe, though, that there does come to that major valid point, which is purpose. And we talked about purpose earlier. The long livers in this world live a long time. So as I said, I'm from a family of long livers. I mean, super long livers. Okay, so I have four great uncles and aunts. Only one has not lived to 100. Okay, but actually, no, Uncle Tony died at 99. Technically speaking, actually, that's not true. So okay, two. Okay, two. But the thing is that my grandfather died he was the youngest one to die, and it was a shock when he died. He was in his late 70s. It was an absolute shock. No one could believe it. Like, how did he die? This guy was like super fit and everything. It was because he didn't have a purpose in life at that time. Now, whatever the reason that happened, why that happened, it was a confluence of events. And if you look at the aging process, a lot of old people, like the Queen is a prime example. She just immediately, the minute Prince Philip died, she just went off a cliff, and everyone could see she was going to go. But why was that? Because she had no purpose to live life. So in answer to your question, I don't agree with that. I think we will want to have children. There are some people who do not want to have children, and I agree. It's a lot of work, but I believe having that option means that because it's no pressure, you can learn to do it later in life. And so as long as you have the functionality or the fitness to allow yourself to do that, in sense of, I was talking earlier that I do sports, I do combat sports. I took up combat sports in my late 30s actually. And I'm talking, I went to very high levels, I still do, and compete with people who are young enough to be my son, right? And the reality is that I had some talent, but also I had to work at keeping that physical fitness, or that ring time, as they say. And so if you're going to live forever, you can't just discard things that don't make sense too quickly, because we will do that at our peril. I don't know if that answers the question for you, but that's sort of what I believe.
Well, it is kind of a philosophical question, and there are no easy yes or no, black and white, right or wrong. It is to consider and to think about it in the future.
Yeah. It's agreed, and I do believe though that, but also again on that note, one of the things that drove me to this situation was, I was married and divorced by the time I was 30, right? So so suddenly all of a sudden I was 30 years old. I was a single father. Well, I had a child, I had a business, etc. And I saw all these people that I knew, these women that I knew who were super cool, suddenly go really nuts, because they were looking at like this sort of biological clock ticking, and people that were very accomplished people, even at that age. And I realized that how sort of in a way life is unfair. I mean, I'm not saying life is fair, it isn't always fair, but if we can mitigate, and I think that's one of our areas of civilization, how we mitigate the ill and how we took after our ill and our infirm, our aged, etc., etc. We're trying to mitigate that by having the death of death. We're trying to mitigate those situations, but it does change how you view things. And so sometimes you're going into something where you have now I see doing things with my 6-year-old, and it's a very different dynamic to doing it when I was doing it with my when she was 6. I know physically I can do the same things, but I have the experience and the I wouldn't say maturity, that's a very big word to use, but I have the experience of knowing certain things. And so, yes, I agree with you, but I don't think that once the pressure is off, people will look at things slightly differently, I think.
One more point, because you mentioned about your first marriage, and if we become immortal, or basically we live long enough to live forever as long as we want in a youthful, healthy state, then marriage, as it is considered today, until death do us apart, I think that will not continue. Until death do us apart, if we don't have death, marriage will be very different in the future.
Well, okay, so let me say, so I will tell you this one, on that answer, exactly right. I never believed until death do us part. Forget it. That's not going to happen. It is about, it is about mutual interests that work together. So if it's almost like you're having a child. So maybe marriage is about bringing up a child together. And then after that time, you move along. But you know what? The difference is this. So you're a guy who say, so you can have a kid at 20, and then you have another one at 45. Just say, keep it simple, right? And then you can have another one at 60, if you wanted to, or 70. And if you have the physicality of a fit man, you could be going to your 90. But a woman doesn't have that option. So what that does is it skews the playing field. And so then what happens is they start to go, oh my God, you get the whole bitter old woman stuff. Well, I can sort of understand it. I'd be pissed off. And so in actual fact, when you look at that point of view, actually by doing that, you change it exactly as you rightly point out, marriage. It does change it. And marriage is, anyway, it's, in my opinion, I think it's slightly overrated, but there you go. But it's about keeping the fact is you want to create, if you do have progeny, you want to create that progeny and give it the most stable area possible. So yeah, maybe I only get married for 25 years, but you know what? Bam, and then you're free and you can go, and maybe it releases the pressure. It's a bit like I used to joke with my first ex-wife. That was a very bad term, but my ex-wife is that we should live in separate houses and live together, and that was actually the best period of our marriage, where we lived in separate areas, but we saw each other all the time because we psychologically had somewhere we could get away from. So by having fertility indefinitely, and the fact that we might live for 500 years, and I think 500 years is a long time, even for someone of your intelligence to really comprehend. It is just something that we have to look at. But yes, it does change, and it changes a lot of things. Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, I agree. And the other thing as well is you don't have ignorance. And so, what I mean by ignorance is you know better. You've gone through life. You know what it's like. So when you're 20 years old and you're full of beans and you want to go down the road and you're going to pick a fight with someone, you don't do that when you're 45 and you've had experience, because you know what it means. It's not the movies. And so that's the same with having children. That's the same with living longer. It's all the same thing. So you have to determine what is important to you. And that comes with, with knowledge is, a friend of mine had this thing. He said, I wanted my epitaph. He obviously hadn't come around to your way of thinking yet, but I'll put him in touch with you, Jose. I think you can turn him. He said, ignorance is bliss. He died knowing nothing. And this is what he wanted to be as his epitaph. So in other words, knowing nothing is great, but we don't have that luxury. So we have to accept that and move on with that.
Very interesting conversation. And it seems that we have indeed delved into some of the philosophical aspects of this topic. I have stated before that it seems to me a great and worthwhile transhumanist aspiration to expand the time window during which people could be able to make those choices. Because honestly, given the world as it is today, I would say most people are not ready to have children by, say, the age of 35. And if they had the option to have a significantly expanded lifespan where they could accumulate life experience, accumulate resources, so that if they chose to have a child, they would be able to raise that child in a very comfortable, prosperous, nurturing setting, then they could say when they turn 120 and they remain biologically youthful, all right, I've lived a bit. I think I can be a good parent now. Let's give this child raising thing a try. And I do think that in a future transhumanist society, that would be an option. And it's quite possible that people who might not resort to that option during today's conventional lifespan might choose to do it later on as another experience that they could attempt and essentially see what happens if they really devote 25 years of their life to raising a child, because if they're 120 and well established in the world, they might have that luxury. So
and probably be better parents.
Yes. I
would imagine they'd be better parents. I know I'd be a better parent now than I would back when I was 20. Kids having kids, this could be a major, awesome thing for mankind in so many ways. I think that one thing of lengthening a woman's fertility period could be huge. So,
and also, Jason, that's a very valid point. Kids having kids. So when you're 20, right? So just the way you even said that, when you're 20, well, hold on a minute, mate. You're an adult at 18, but you still call yourself a kid at 20. And so then it's, wait a minute, but they're old enough to go to war and kill people, right? But you're right. They are children in that sense. And I don't mean it like they're children, they're there, but I mean they're children in the sense that they don't have the experience and knowledge of life. Doesn't mean they might not make good parents. And I guarantee you, my second round, I'm in my 50s. I'm like, shit, still not ready, mate. And I've gone through the whole round. But, you're never ready. But they do open your mind. And in actual fact, one of the reasons when Katarina was born, because of what happened, was what drove me into this sort of area. In other words, it's actually what I decided to come back to something I'd originally studied years before, because I thought, okay, this is what I need to do. And so you're right, it takes the pressure off. And it does take the pressure off the fact that you can do certain things, and you can do, why is it you have to go to school, go to college, or whatever it is, or do your military, or whatever you have to do, and then you have to go and find a wife, have a kid, or find a husband, have a kid. Why can't you just go and be a research scientist for 20 years and then go have a kid? You know, why can't you run around? I mean, I know someone who had a whole family. She wrote a very part of our organization. She's based down in Los Angeles. Wrote a great sort of award-winning sort of TV sort of mini-series thing about a woman who discovers what would you do with a second chance in life? And this woman has had a family, you know, and full grown-up kids, everything. You wouldn't believe it. You'd think, my God, you've got like a 27-year-old kid. What the hell? And you look at it, you couldn't believe it. But now she's living the life that you probably did at college. But she's doing it that way. There is no right, there is no wrong. But having those options is a lot better than having different flavors of M&M options, isn't it? You know?
Yes, I think indeed. That's a really interesting conversation, because I've had 2 children, and that was definitely has been so far a highlight of my life. And I imagine no matter how long I live, that will be the highlight of my life. But I'm not certain that I define aging and the ability to have children or not have children on a value proposition as you are assuming that most women do. Most of my girlfriends didn't have children, and they're well-adjusted, amazing adults, and I don't know that they would want to at this point either. And I think that that's totally okay. My experience certainly was bettered by having children, but that I don't think that that's a value proposition necessary for the future. So when I look at the future, I think that it would be great to have a choice, but then I think that vastly women may not even be carrying their own children in the future. So I think that the world will open up to a myriad of technologies. I am happy to have had children, but I think that the shift in mindset that women have now, I don't know any old bitter women, but
I'm being general in my conversation. You know what I'm saying?
But, if there are any, and they have or have not had children, I imagine that has more to do with a hormone shift. And that's why my original question was more about hormone balance, how long the hormones stay balanced. You're saying that they stay balanced at least long enough to have the child.
I can answer that to you. Sorry, that's 2 years. It's a 2.5 year period. That's what it is. We thought it was going to be 3 months. It's 2.5 years minimum.
And so are you assuming that every 2.5 years that somebody had this therapy, that they would then have balanced hormones?
For 2.5 years. That's the results we have so far. We only have 2.5 years of data. We don't know anymore. We thought it was going to be 3 months, just enough to have the child. So we don't know. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, let's look at cell phones. In 2000, you had the flippy phone for the Matrix, and then suddenly we went to Nokia, and then we went to the iPhone, and now we're going to have a thing in the back of the ear. So we're in that phase now, as we are in the golden period. Like you had the dream team of physics in the 1930s. You have this. We're in that period right now, Liz. And also back to your point about a value proposition. And I say this from the point of view of where you come from as a person. I'm saying you personally, but I'm not saying, I know a lot of women who don't have children, and we have a couple of people in our organization who don't have children and will not have children because they don't want children. That's not a judgment call. It's not a value proposition, far from it. But having that option is a very big value proposition. And if you feel that it's just taken away from you, if you feel that you don't have that choice, it can, I'm not saying it makes everyone bitter, but it makes some people bitter. And it makes other people not bitter, but it just depends. But having that option changes the dynamics. You're not constantly flying around, it's also, it's not just about, as you say, you might be carrying, not even be carrying your own children. It's not about that. It's about the sense of purpose, continuation of your bloodline, continuation of your raison d'etre, of your culture, of your whatever it is. And by saying what Jose says, which is, hey, we're going to live forever. Well, Michael Corleone started out like a decent guy, right? And next thing he becomes a really evil guy at the end of it. It's not a great analogy, but I'm saying that people change over time. So you don't always know. But I think having that option to sort of balance that playing field, and also you are someone who's from the cutting edge of thinking. You're already someone who started your own business in this area. You were a patient number one in what you did. I mean, you're not the average subsection of women in middle-aged women. You're just not. And you're cutting edge. So to say those people that surround you are going to be more than likely cutting edge. I mean, how many friends do you have who, I'm not going to say anything that might be the wrong thing to come across, I won't say the wrong thing, but they're not going to be, should we say, more pedestrian in their thinking. And that's what I think you have to sort of take into consideration. I mean, all of us on this panel have lived relatively cutting edge lives, even if we think we haven't. We have. And
yeah, certainly. And I am also speaking to the technology that Bill's talking about, that, you know, someday even people who are trans or mixed gender will be able to have children based on, you know, harvesting cells for iPS.
Absolutely. I can see, I mean, the decoupling of gender and sexuality has already happened. And I can tell you this, I've never dated a girl or been married to a woman who's a better cook than me, period, done. So, you know what I mean? That's does that make me a woman? No, it certainly doesn't, right? So, you know, and also I could argue that, you know, certainly, you know, a couple of people I dated were much better at business than I am supposed to be, right? So why is it that a woman can't be good at business and a guy can't be good at cooking or whatever it is, right? That sort of stuff. I agree with you. I absolutely. And I think we are at a massive change in society, that the difference of the world will be far greater in the next 15 years than it has been in the previous 50 or 60 years. I don't know if you've heard of a science fiction writer called John Brenner. Have you heard of him? He's John Brenner. He's great, John. And so, you know, he predicted, he's from a group of family of scientists. And so I think the world's going to change a lot more in the next 15 years in ways that none of us in this panel could imagine. We can maybe take some bets on it and see in 15 years, if we put $100 on it, it'll be worth like a cent in 15 years.
Yeah, and so since we're on the transhuman panel, I think that probably the interest here is this sort of rejuvenation. Obviously, men would be interested in as well. And if so, if it balances these hormones for 2.5 years, does that mean that it regenerates the body? Because I'm guessing that a lot of people are listening that are more interested in the regeneration capabilities of the technology and maybe children secondary.
Okay, so I mean, I don't think it's probably a good time for me to take my clothes off in front of the camera yet, but maybe another time. But I think, yes, it does. Absolutely, it does. And you get muscle tone because a lot of the reasons with fertility is such that you have to be physically, the reasons you have those hormones, for instance, your hair is thicker, your skin is more supple, your bones are denser, because you have to be designed to carry the child. Now, with men, it's the same thing. You could argue that the world is based around sex and violence, right? You know, sex is to procreate and violence is to either keep it or get it. That's a very broad statement, and I probably shouldn't say that. But if you think about it from the point of view of a man, why do we have muscles? Why do we have that sort of physical strength? It's for us to be able to provide and cope. So yes, however, with men, it's more difficult to revamp them up. It's just, we just don't have such a rate determining step as a menopause. As I said, it's the one time we're more complicated than others. And I work with a couple of Greek professors in this area who have really been struggling about how to do that. And as you said, Bill, about the IPS stuff, that's the stuff that we've been looking at with that, of how to make that work with men. I saw on the chat here, do you want me to answer some of these questions on here?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So it's my first time doing this, so you have to forgive me.
You're doing awesome, man. Just saying.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Okay, so right. Okay, so I'll say. Okay, so don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Is that a bit of humor there, Ben? Is that? I'll throw your toys out of the pram, as we'd say in English. So okay, we'll try not to. Artificial wombs. Okay.
Yes, and our friend Mike Lazine also mentioned ectogenesis as one of the technologies that Liz was speaking about to give people more options as to how to have children, even if the pregnancy is not a traditional biological pregnancy. You could still have an artificial womb, and you could enable somebody who is, for instance, 70 years old and infertile to still have a genetically similar descendant.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really wondering what that's going to look like. I mean, we're not talking about dudes walking around pregnant. It's going to be like some sort of other theme, right? Right. I mean, what's that going to look like? Just wondering. If anybody knows.
Okay. Dudes walking around pregnant. Well, you know what? I mean, maybe it might be interesting to see what this feels like to be pregnant, Jason. How do you know? Maybe it feels that maybe you want to try it. And maybe, you know what, if you had the option, you could zip and clip and then come back, maybe you do it. You don't know, right? And maybe this is the beginning of that area. I'm not saying you're going to want to do that. I'm not saying that's sort of what I would like to do, but you never know. But what I'll say with this, artificial wombs, okay, with pregnancy has a number of factors. You have to have an egg, you have to have a sperm, they have to be put together, and then they have to go through, the egg has to go through the fallopian tube and then land in the uterus, and it has to then develop, and then you've got a sort of springy while until it sort of gets some stability. Depending on how your view is on Roe versus Wade, is it 21 weeks, is it 12 weeks, is it whatever, right? But the fact is, there is a lot of steps in that process. Okay, so what we've done is we've taken the first step, which is reversing menopause, because that really is good for extending the quality of your life going forward. And we have a good start with that. And as I said, Liz, we can have some physical areas that are improving. And also we have other stuff that we work with, like we're taking a series of creams, serums, and procedures that will make you work better. But again, it's a work in progress. We can talk about that another time. The artificial womb one, though, is a different thing altogether, because that is about taking that child. Okay, that's about taking that child to maturity. And this is where Bill, rightly points out, maybe if we flick some switches earlier, I mean, we can grow it quicker. We can speed up the growth. But I don't know if that's the right way, because if you bloom too early, you tend to sort of wither early too. And maybe what needs to be done is for us to take our time and maybe spend a little bit longer nurturing the fundamentals right at the beginning of a child. So with regards to artificial wombs, how do I think that will look? Well, what is a womb? What is a womb? What do you classify as a womb, Jason?
A uterus, I guess.
Right. It's a fleshy, warm area that promotes growth. It's a seedbed. So how would it look like? Oh, I don't know. I mean, if I was going to fly off on my imagination,
I'm in danger of showing how much I don't know about women here, man. Sorry.
So I would say that it's a warm seedbed that promotes growth. So how could you do an artificial womb? Well, I don't know enough about that area. Okay. In other words, we're not looking into that area yet. As I said, we've taken what we know and we're working with that. And what we know, we're working with that, and we keep going on. If someone wants to come in and give me some corrections, I'm very happy to hear it. But this is how I would fly it out. I'd probably do some sort of molecular organic compound that's structured into a sort of tube area, or like a spherical sphere that opens up. And then I'd have within that surrounding an amniotic fluid that would run with a series of proteins and peptides, whatever is required, that plug into a skin-like sac, which could be taken from your own skin cells. So you could create your own artificial womb from your own, using IPS on the skin cells to grow a sac from your own genetic material. So therefore, there's no risk of rejection. There's no risk of contamination with a standard structured genetic. This is me flying off the top of the handle here, okay? I'm just saying. And then, maybe you can have it so that you can all all the friends can sign the outside of the shell while they're doing it. So you keep it personalize it. And then you have your womb mother, and then you can maybe stick a chip in it, and it has some sentientness, and then it starts to do the vacuum cleaning later on. I don't know, but that's what I would say, something like that. But I don't know enough about artificial wombs. However, they do exist, but I don't. That's not my specialist area.
Still, this is quite a fascinating exploration, and I've pointed out here that Section 84 of the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform supports ectogenesis, so anybody who is interested can go on our website and read that particular section. We have a question from our very generous supporter, Celeste Castaldo, who is our Northern California liaison, and she wonders, were there many health benefits from the stem cell treatment to the women's ovaries?
Great question. What was it, Celeste? Great question, Celeste. Yes, but there are caveats with that. The first caveat is if you have a propensity towards cancer, we have to do like a Roma karyotyping test or like a CA125, CA19 test. It's a series of genetic marker tests. You normally have them at around about 40 years old if you're a woman, to see whether you have a propensity towards some form of ovarian cancer. But the benefits are that the women's ovaries are, so we say, running a bit more ramming speed, or a bit more at a sort of an energy that allows them to have the benefits of the hormones flooding through their bodies. So I give you an example. If you have HRT, hormone replacement therapy, you take around about 4 times as much hormones in volume than you actually produce inside your body when you are premenopausal. So if you think about that, you're taking less wastage on your body. And the fact is that when you have that many hormones, something in your body's got to clean up that excess stuff somewhere. So the answer is the health benefits have been that women's hair had one of our candidates, actually, her hair had fallen out and it grew back. Again, I have asked them, with some of them will talk about these things. 1 or 2 are considering that they will start to talk about it. At the moment, we still have issues. Obviously, it's a very personal thing. But they do let me talk about these things. Their hair grew back. Skin levels have been phenomenal. Energy levels have been much, much higher. Sex drive has increased. Also, skin, like sort of where you have crepiness in the skin, has started to reduce. Has not gone away, but improved. And the other area has been injuries from sport. They've not had such issues with achiness, or not bone breaks. We haven't had any bone breaking issues yet, but they have been those. So yes, there have been quite a few health benefits. And this is really what it's about. And in actual fact, for us, it's much easier for us to just restart your menstrual cycle and give you those health benefits and actually give you a child. So if people here in the transhumanist world want to have the Jose level or the Liz level of actually improving your quality of life, that's something we can definitely do right now. Yes, and it's pretty good.
Very good. So it is quite promising that these other health benefits accrue to women who received these treatments. And also, our friend Ampero notes, with regard to our previous conversation on ectogenesis, that ectogenesis would allow for more intensive prenatal care and observation. So perhaps one could spot issues with the developing fetus.
Ampero, that's a great point. So we actually have one of our members of the team is working on a paper that is the working title is Uberkinder, but I don't think it's probably going to end up being that. It doesn't sound too good. But it's basically about prenatal care and understanding and observation, and that's exactly what we're looking at. So in other words, we should be thinking about starting it really early on for life extension. So some of us here are, way past the age that we should be living. If we were in Zimbabwe, we'd all be dead. You wouldn't. You're 51 years old, and that's it. You're out of there. So some of us wouldn't be in this panel anymore. So in terms of that, the prenatal care is very important, and he's actually writing a paper which we would hope that he would be able to talk about, that Walter would be able to talk about very soon. But it's very, very, very true, and that actual fact, this is very important about maximizing the quality of the child as you can. And there's a very interesting point here. People who've experienced starvation, they can affect the quality of the child that they can produce. In other words, not the quality, but their height rather. So it's one variable. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're very right, Amparo, that this is something that we need to look at going forward. And this is what we are doing, because for us, fertility is not just about conception and delivery. It's about present, and right to maturity, which is basically a self-functioning adult, which in the case of most people should be in their early 20s. Some of us on this panel may be a bit longer, but there we go. But that's basically that. So absolutely, and I'm very happy actually to get Walter on. Unfortunately, he was one of the people that couldn't make it today. I was actually hoping he would be on today, but he couldn't.
Very interesting. And in reference to essentially us being a bit older than most people who were considered young in prior history, our friend John H. notes that Alexander of Macedon started his military endeavors when he was about age 16. And of course, he died at 33 after having conquered most of the known world at the time. And that was younger than any of us here. And
exactly right. And actual John, I just say, as being a Greek, he was a liberator. Let's be honest. Okay, come on, he was a liberator. No, but the point is though, that you're right. But an interesting line where that being said, interesting point. Cleomenes, the king of Sparta, who was he was a lame king of Sparta. So it was a thing about Sparta where if the king was lame, there was a prophecy that the kingdom of Sparta would fall. And in actual fact, it was at their greatest point, and then they did eventually lose the Battle of Electra. What happened though, Cleomenes died fighting at the age of 81 years old. Leonidas of 300 fame was 60 years old when he fought, 62 years old when he fought the battle. But you are right though, he was viewed as a man by the age of, well, actually, he wasn't viewed as a man by the age of 16, because you were at your peak of manhood at 30 in Spartan society. In the Roman societies, you also had it so that you started off and you had to do your basic learning, then you went to law school, you went to the military, then you became a tribune or whatever it was, and blah, 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 blah. And you went through it, and eventually you become a senator. And that's what happened in the Roman Republic, assuming you weren't a slave, of course, or something like that. There's that sort of small little thing that they miss out. But that thing is very important. You're right. People were much younger, and they had to achieve. I mean, Mehmet the Conqueror, who captured Constantinople in 1453, was 21 years old when he captured it. I mean, the Greek general that betrayed the Greeks was a bit older, but hey, there you go. But that's that.
Yes, indeed. And it is fascinating to consider that essentially the lifespans we have today are often already much longer than the lifespans that were available to people in ancient times. So there has been a kind of paradigm shift about how we perceive youthfulness and aging and what is considered young, what is considered older. Jose, go ahead.
Just a quick comment. Also, young people today want to change the world. There is this very young Belgian person who is, I think, only 10 years old, and he says he wants to cure aging, that he wants to become immortal. At age 10, he got a degree in physics, and he said the purpose of his life is to cure aging at age 10 in Belgium today.
But he's so worried about aging, he's not living.
Well, I think he is living and he's seen how his parents age, and he doesn't like his parents aging or his grandparents. And maybe he doesn't even like how he's aging, even though he's so young.
Yeah, maybe that's the thing. And maybe we have these choices as well. That maybe, you know what is we call it like the mosaic. So in other words, your prime language learning ability is about the age of 10. So if you haven't learned a number of different languages or been exposed to them in a sort of full immersion way before the age of 10, it's much harder to learn a new language. I mean, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I had that luxury, so maybe that's different. But it's true, you have that ability. But your peak strength in your 50s, I mean, you can actually be stronger at 50 than you are at 30 or 25. But your recovery rate isn't as good. So there's all these areas where you peak at certain areas. So maybe this guy just wants to be a 10-year-old for the rest of his life. Maybe. I mean, you never know. It could be. I mean, we've all seen Interview with a Vampire, right? I mean, she was a kid for ages, right? So, you know.
Like Peter Pan. Peter Pan wanted to be a kid all his life.
There you go.
I am sharing the information. The boy genius, actually, it's 11 years old. So I will put it in the YouTube channel for people to read about this, because it really is an incredible odyssey. This young guy who is a genius and wants to cure aging.
Yes, indeed. And we have several people chiming in about him. I posted an article about this amazing child prodigy, Laurent Simons. He wants to help humans achieve immortality. And Didier Kernel, our friend from Belgium, writes that he is now 12 years old. And this was, I believe what Didier is saying is he was just a speaker during a conference in the Dutch language 4 years ago in Brussels. So he may be already undertaking a conference tour, which is promising because he may indeed be one of the people who helps achieve indefinite life extension for us. He certainly has the intellect to do that. So fascinating. Now, Art Ramon, you mentioned something in the YouTube chat about the microbiome and alleviating some of the issues with it. Could you please elaborate on that?
Oh, I was just wondering, is there any sort of microbiome that develops when you're still a fetus? Or does that all happen after you're born and you're exposed to the air and the environment?
You want me to answer that question?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes. The answer is, do we have the answers? No. Are we looking at microbiomes? Absolutely. Unfortunately, Walter's not here, and neither is Deborah, which is, some of you might have met Deborah at the conference in Dublin. She, unfortunately, would be much better placed to answer that question. But there's something we are looking at, because what we've taken is, on a philosophical term, is a lot of these areas about the old wives' tales. And, you know, what you are, what you eat. And basically, if you think about it, your intestines are a tunnel that goes all the way through your body. It's not technically your body, and it's an absorption membrane. And so those biomes maximize they prepare the foods or the ingredients that come in. So the answer to that is, yes, there are. We don't have enough evidence, and we want to start looking at that. And we have been beginning to look at that. We had two candidates who had very bad forms of Lyme's disease. And we found that we had to really look at their what they ate and how they worked with that. But we don't have the full answers. But that's a really good one. I might actually put something together for that, Art, on going forward, because that's a great question, actually. I'm sorry I can't give you the full answer.
Okay, and another question. As far as the IPS process, where you take a source cell and convert it into an oocyte, are you basically just taking the DNA in it and stripping it and taking half of it off? Is that how you turn it into an oocyte? Or is there something else going on where the cell needs further transformation to turn from a regular cell into an oocyte? And does it matter what sort of original source tissue? I mean, is there a difference between a skin cell versus the tissue that your veins are made of, which might be more similar to like the fallopian tubes, anything like that?
They're not actually similar to the fallopian tubes, but that's the point. But you're right, though. You're very right. It's a very great point, which is the reason why people use skin cells is because it's a follicular organ, and you've got to think of it like a balloon. It's less differentiated than a nerve or a bone cell. So, in other words, if you have a balloon fully blown up and you pop it with a needle, it pops. Whereas a balloon that is half blown up and you pop it with a needle, if you're quick enough, you can patch a hole. I mean, theoretically speaking, right? So, in other words, it allows you to play with things more. So, why we use skin cells. Also, the thing about skin cells is because of the way they break open in the mesoderm and the way that they memory block divide. Thank you. When they divide in the memory block, the way they divide allows you to play with them a little bit more. Again, this is something that we are looking at now. I'm not going to go into all our little secrets because I won't. Sorry, but that you can speak to me offline. If you want to, but again, the reason why we want to do that is because skin cells, if it's your own organisms, and they're right, they would work. By the way, there's different parts of the skin that are more conducive for that.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, different parts of the skin that work better. Yeah.
All right, fascinating. And now let us go on to a few more questions from our panel. I am wondering if Ben Ballweg has a question.
Hey, Zach, thanks for being here today. I wondered if you could compare Austin Biotech's work with Dina Radenkovic at Gamito and Jennifer Garrison at Buck. Without giving away any secrets.
No, it's not about secrets. It was just an opinion. Yeah, I mean, I've actually been on a couple of Buck Institute conferences, speaking to people. They never seem to answer my messages. So I don't know, actually, to be honest. I don't know about that, Ben. Yes, similar. I think we are more... We're more everyman, every person, rather than they're much more up there in the sort of intellectual regions. We work in a much more simplistic way. We're more practical. Remember, we're self-funded. We're not funded by an organization. We don't have any. We're totally self-funded. We're patient-funded clinical trials. So we're patient-funded rather. So it's a business, but it's not a huge, massive for-profit business. It's a business about growing our procedures. So we're different in the sense we don't have a lot of money behind us. We don't have a lot of resources, and we have to work very with great flexibility. But in terms of what we're looking at, no, I don't think we are similar, actually. No, because we work on the mental aspect, the emotional aspect. I mean, Freudian is something they don't talk about at all. We talk about being emotions is part of being human. And I know you can argue put a chip in ourselves, but hey, look, Data had a fucking emotional chip, didn't he? Right. So it's like there is emotions and stuff that we work with. They don't work with. No, they don't look at. They don't really look at the surrounding areas of what goes on with the fertility aspect and the regrowth aspect. That being said, I know more about what Garrison does than Radenkovic, but the thing is that they're far more accomplished than we are, in the sort of traditional sense of what they've done and their achievements. So I do look at what they do. We are much more about the setup. If that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. And now we have a question from Celeste Castaldo. She wonders, can you address any successes achieved in preventing menopause completely in regenerative medicine? Has that ever been done?
Define completely, Celeste.
Yes. Well, we can await that response from Celeste, as in what does it mean to prevent menopause completely? Is it that it never happens to a woman, or that it doesn't happen along some fixed time frame where it would normally happen? But we'll see what Celeste says. Let's go to David Shoemaker in the meantime and see what questions he might have.
Yeah, thank you, Gennady, and thank you, Zach. Someone in the chat, I think it was Celeste, asked about your website, and I was out there looking around, and I was looking at the pipeline page, and you talked about that a little bit with PRP and exotherapy, and then we also talked on spawn, the skin cells to human eggs. But the project on use of senolytics and the 3D printing aspects we really haven't talked about today. So I'm wondering, are those in R&D by your company, or is this something you're partnering with, or
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Absolutely. I will talk a little bit about it. That was a committee decision. I wasn't 100% happy about putting that one up. So that was a committee decision. And the thing is, because we work in the shared decision-making area, as a company, we work in the shared decision-making environment, because not every one person has the answer. And so on that note, that's where I personally come from. I didn't think we should put it up there. That being said, we are looking into working with certain people. I believe that we have a way of making that work, where we could print certain organs up a certain way. I mean, I know there's a company that was based down in Southern California that was looking at reprinting livers, because livers regenerate really easily, but of course the matrix of a liver is much more complicated than, say, an ovary. Ovary is much easier to print. A sperm cell is much easier to print, actually, because it's got half the genetic material and it's also ready to get going. So the answer is, I would love to do that, but I don't have the money to do that, and I would need more money to do that, and that would take a lot of money to do. Well, a few million maybe. If you got it, I'll take it. But I mean, it's but that's what I would do. But yes, again, we talked about, as I said, the rest of some of the members of the team want to talk about all the things that we're looking to do and we want to do. I believe we should not say that, but that's what they've done, and we have to go with that as is. We are looking at that, but again, it's a little bit of that. Pipeline's also like that one's a little bit further down the line. Again, though, that this is maybe why we're starting to talk about what we do, because we need help to do that. We need the right people to work with, and hey, I mean, this is what it's all about. We're supposed to sort of share our ideas in meaningful ways and move forward. So yes, we'd love to move forward in that area. And we believe that's a big area, because if you can combine that with flipping Yamanaka switches earlier on, you're talking about a hybrid of the replacement, the maintenance way, and the pre-program way. Let's call it the third way. It's like the third way. We can look at that, and that's where we think we are. Because who used to say, that there was that great one where Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, where we're comparing the weapons of their choice, and Saladin, Richard the Lionheart got a steel bar out and took out his broadsword and slashed the bar in half. I don't know if it's a true story or not, but it's true. And then Saladin just picked up a silk scarf and then just sliced it up with his scimitar, into 15 pieces. Which one's better? It depends how you use it, right? So I think in that area where we are, it's such a variety of areas that we have to look at and say, hey, maybe this way that Zach's and his team or their team's doing it is a great way, but maybe only a little bit of it is good. And maybe only a little bit of this one is good, and we come with a new way. And I believe that's where we are as a discipline, as a scientific. We're writing the book. No, we're not buying a book about it. We're writing the book. Jose is a prime example. We had the members of our team where we got into some of the anti-aging stuff and the creams because we were trying to produce gasoline from algae. And we made a machine to make gasoline from algae, which people have done before, but we tried to make it commercially viable and accidentally produced a byproduct that's propane diols. Hey, man, we didn't know that. And suddenly we could do that. We weren't looking in that area. So I think we believe that area is a very important area to look at because it would give you a lot more control. And it also changed the way of organ trafficking as well, and all those sort of things, which do affect our life, quality of life, and maybe not us here, but certainly people in Indonesia and Philippines and parts of China or whatever, or wherever that is. So that's what I think. So.
Yes, indeed. Thank you to Zack, and we do have a clarification from Celeste as to what she means about successes in preventing menopause. She is asking about any great successes. So hypothetically, let's say a woman would have had menopause at 50 and it is able to be delayed until 60. That would be considered a great success, I would think. So has any sort of achievement on that scale been attained to your knowledge?
Sorry, I was just thinking something else has sent me something deeper here. Sorry, say that again. Repeat that again. The question, sorry.
So this is Celeste's question. Has there been any great success in, say, postponing menopause in women? So hypothetically, if a woman would have had menopause at 50, now she would have it at 60 because of interventions.
Right. Okay. That's exactly what we do. That's what we do. So we're basically, so we have an 85% success rate of reversing menopause, which means that for 2.5 years, you have the abilities so far, because you've only been going for about 2 years with this. For 2.5 years, you have the abilities of having the benefits of being premenopausal. So have we extended it? We do have some from the early phase, from phase 1 back in 2015, 2016, unfortunately, it's only one case, so it's not acceptable. It's not an acceptable data set for us to really work with. But we have one case where the lady involved was at the time in her late 50s, is now obviously in her mid 60s. She has still got the same functionality that she had before, so for 6 years. And her mother also went through menopause a lot earlier than she did, way earlier. And she lived a much more unhealthy life than her mother. So in that sense, that's not enough data set for us to give you, hey, that's what we've done and this is what we've created. I just don't have that data set, I'm afraid, to give you that answer. But that's what we're looking at. And so far, we've had some pretty good stuff, but again, a very small data set.
Yes, thank you very much for that answer, Zack. And we have about 7 minutes remaining in our virtual enlightenment salon today. Let's see how many other questions we can get to in the meantime. Our friend Daniel Tweed asks, has parenthood itself ever been studied for correlation with extended longevity? And I myself am not aware of such studies, but I was curious, Zack, if you had any knowledge either way.
Yes, great question, Daniel. On that side, just to say the study, there has been a study done on marriage. I'm going to come to your parent pointing question, where that married men live longer than married women. So when men are single, they live shorter lives, but when they're married, they live longer lives. But it reverses the case generally with women, which I think is an interesting statistic. I don't know why that is. And yes, parenthood has been studied as a correlation with extended longevity, but not necessarily. They say that children can keep you young, but they also can, give you a bunch of gray hairs or whatever it is, or it keeps you age you. So we don't have full studies, and I don't have anything off the top of my head. What I can do is ask the rest of the team, and I can get back to you on that if you'd like.
Yes, I think it would be fascinating to have a follow-up on that question. Now, our friend Walter Crompton, who seems to be the same Walter who is your colleague, Zack, writes, all organs are in the process of failing in late adulthood, albeit at different rates. Stopping menopause is essentially the same as stopping heart disease. Would you agree with that observation?
I'm not going to mess with the heifer. He's right.
Very nice. Very nice. And we also have an interesting question more along philosophical lines from Sergei Gubkin. So he wants to know, Zack, do you think churches and religions will completely die out if we live longer and stay young and healthy longer? I think he's referring to the commonplace idea, and it is an idea I place a lot of credence in, that religions often evolved historically as a response, an attempt to explain human mortality and provide some sort of sense of the perpetuation of the self after biological death. So do you believe that purpose will be obsoleted if we have indefinite life extension?
Absolutely not. Purpose, absolutely not. In fact, that is one of the prerequisites of indefinite life extension, because otherwise you become decadent and decrepit. And I don't mean by physically decadent, decrepit. I'm talking about if you believe that you're top of the food chain, there's only one way to go, and that's down. Yes. And that's it. So you have to believe there's something greater. And what was your name again? Was it Sam that said it? Was it Sam?
It's Sergei. And I think he wasn't asking about purpose generally, but about the purpose of religions more specifically. So do you think...
What is religion? No, I don't agree with that, because I think the religion will just morph. I mean, let's be realistic. Back in the day, God was, this sort of thing that was human-looking and had all the whims. And Zeus was a pretty sort of, he's a pretty deviant kind of guy, right? And then all of a sudden, we went from Zeus to Jesus. And Jesus was this person. I'm saying the different religions, and we can get into that discussion another time. But I think that is also something that is we need. By the definition of what makes us human, and I know this is a transhuman speaking area, but we have to expect transhuman is still at least half human, right? At least was this with humans in the world.
Oh yeah, humanism is the basic core of transhumanism. Right. So yeah.
So in other words, what makes us human is the reason we tell stories, right? The reason why we tell stories is because we want to make sense of things. As I remember writing the novels, and when I write it, fiction's got to make sense. Life doesn't. And so, in other words, you have this thing where we have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We have to have a structure. We give ourselves structure so that we can understand what it means to be what it is. Why do you have? I don't know. I'm trying to think now. The prodigal son, or whatever it is. That's some other story, or whatever it is, or Icarus flying too close to the sun, a sense of hubris, etc. So religion, in whatever form, will be there. Whether you call it Neoplatonism, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Hinduism, or even transhumanism, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it could be anything. It's some form of whether it's being woke, is that form, it could arguably become a religion. It's a way of understanding what means something to people. And so you do need something, but do churches as we know it exist? I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I don't believe that's an opinion that I have, that, people need to feel the ability to believe in something else. It makes them feel good. Not that I necessarily adhere to that rule personally, but it does take a certain type of person who can believe there's nothing else.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for that response, Zack. And we have feedback from our friend Mike Lazine, who writes he thinks that religions will evolve, and there might be some faiths who worship artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence, and there could be evolutions of Christianity, for example, there is the Christian Transhumanist Association. We had a virtual enlightenment salon with its founder, Micah Redding, and there's also the Mormon Transhumanist Association, which is now headed by Carl Youngblood. We also had a salon with him. We had a salon with Lincoln Cannon, who was one of the founders of the Mormon Transhumanist Association. So I tend to agree with you, Zach. Religion will not disappear. Religions will evolve. And I say this as an atheist and materialist, but it looks like our time today has come to an end. Thank you very much, Zach, for a most fascinating discussion, for your presentation, for sharing with us the good work you're doing at Austin Biotech, and for this wide-ranging conversation into the potential implications of these technological breakthroughs. So,
can I say something? I
yes,
just want to say that I've got sort of background envy with everyone else. You've got all your medals up there, and you've got your sort of back stuff on the wall. That's amazing. Jason, you've gone for the pure black, and Ben, that's lovely, keeping it simple. And Jose too. And I've got a trash can in the back. I suddenly feel like, oh my God, I should have done it better than this. But thank you, Gennady. Thank you, everyone, for giving me the time. I really appreciate that. That's very kind of you. And I would, thank you, Liz. Thank you for coming back on there. It's good as well. The window look, that's good. So it's, I thank you. And I would like to keep in touch with you, Gil. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you, Zach, and everyone. Live long and prosper.
Okay.
Live long and prosper.